We're too sick to travel, my parents lied while secretly vacationing with my sister. Enjoy the trip. You're paying for everything now, I said, cutting them off. I should have predicted it. The indications were always present. The manner in which they spoke about my sister, as though she were some divine gift bestowed upon humanity, even while I stood right there. They consistently managed to find ways to compliment her, even when she had done absolutely nothing. However, this reached an entirely new level of disrespect. For an entire year, I provided my parents with $600 every week. It was far from easy. I was not affluent or living with surplus money. I labored relentlessly for every single dollar, stretching my finances to ensure they did not face hardship after my father was laid off. They behaved as if it were the end of everything, my mother called me, sobbing uncontrollably, saying they had no idea how they would manage. Bills, groceries, the mortgage, they were completely overwhelmed. I could not bear to witness them collapse, so I took it upon myself to step in and support them. Initially, it felt fulfilling, like I was genuinely making a meaningful difference. However, as time went on, the more assistance I provided, the more they seemed to demand. If I sent $600, it would soon become, Brian, finances are tight this week. Is there any chance you could send a bit more? They never directly stated it, but the guilt was perpetually implied. I would examine my bank account, fully aware that it was not a wise decision. Yet I would still go through with it because they were my parents, and I believed that was simply what family did. Meanwhile, my sister Denise lived comfortably within her secure little world. She married a wealthy man, and to my parents, that marked her as an undeniable success. They never acknowledged the fact that she had never held a job in her entire life. Her husband's wealth was the sole reason she experienced such comfort. Still, they spoke of her as if she were some sort of financial mastermind. She made intelligent decisions, Brian. You ought to learn from her choices. The only decision she truly made was to find a man willing to support her financially. Yet everyone pretended as though she had built her success entirely on her own effort. I refrained from expressing my thoughts because it seemed pointless. Regardless of my actions, she remained their golden child. I figured that as long as she was thriving, I could swallow my pride. Then last week transpired. 3 days prior, I had invited them to a casual cookout. Nothing extravagant, just a few steaks, some drinks, and an enjoyable evening hosted by me. They declined right away. My mother claimed they were not feeling well. I inquired whether they needed anything, and she responded with a weary sigh. We are just trying to recuperate. We do not want you to catch anything, honey. I hesitated and offered to deliver some food. Stop. No, do not come by, she insisted. But if you could possibly help us out with some medication, finances have been somewhat tight this week. I did not hesitate. I immediately sent them $200. Thank you, honey. We will pay you back as soon as we are able. That conversation occurred 3 days ago. The following day, I received a phone call from my neighbor, Mr. Ryan, a kind, elderly gentleman I would occasionally converse with. This time, however, he mentioned something that made my stomach twist in discomfort. I just wanted to inform you that I checked on your parents' house and took care of feeding their fish while they were away. I was stunned. Away? Where did they go? Oh, they went on a trip. They should be back soon. They left 6 days ago. 6 days. I was rendered speechless momentarily as my thoughts spiraled out of control. Who were they with? Your sister and her husband. Looked like a lovely family outing. I do not even recall how I concluded the phone call. I just sat there staring at the wall, trying to wrap my head around it. My parents, the same people who constantly claimed they were struggling, who called me almost every week asking for a little extra cash, had gone on a vacation with Denise without ever mentioning it to me. Not only that, but just 3 days earlier, while they were already on their trip, they blatantly lied to my face. They had told me they were feeling sick, refused to let me visit, and even asked me for money. I just sat there, feeling like the biggest fool on the planet. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying every single time they had asked me for help. Every moment I had stressed over paying my own bills just to make sure they were okay. I thought about how they constantly made me feel like it was my responsibility to support them, while they continued to treat Denise like she was perfect. The next day, they came back home, and I decided it was time to confront them. I didn't really know what to expect, but I definitely wasn't prepared for what was about to happen. I didn't rush over right away. I needed time to cool off. If I had shown up the moment I found out, I probably would have said something I'd regret later. But after a night of tossing and turning, I knew I couldn't just let it slide. So the following evening, I drove over to their house. Denise's car was sitting in the driveway, still covered in dust from the drive back. The porch light was on. I knocked on the door, and after a few moments, my mom opened it, her face lighting up as if nothing was wrong. "Oh, Brian, What a nice surprise. We were just about to have dinner, she said with a big smile. I stepped inside. The house was spotless, like they had done a deep clean before leaving. Fresh flowers sat on the dining table, and a half-unpacked suitcase rested by the stairs. It was like walking into a scene from a perfect little family vacation. I took a deep breath and asked, "So, how was the trip?" The moment the words left my mouth, I saw it. A quick flash of guilt in her eyes before she forced a tight smile. "What trip?" she replied, trying to sound casual. I couldn't help but let out a short, bitter laugh. "The one you took with Denise and her husband. The one you lied about." Her expression changed instantly. Her posture stiffened, and she glanced toward the kitchen as if hoping my dad would jump in to back her up. But he didn't. He just kept moving dishes around, acting like he hadn't heard anything. I waited, giving her a chance to say something, anything that made sense. Instead, she crossed her arms and said defensively, "I don't understand why you're so upset. We don't have to tell you everything we do." I just stared at her, completely dumbfounded. "Are you serious right now? I've been sending you money every single week. I basically paid for that trip without even knowing about it. And just 3 days ago, you told me you were sick and needed money for medicine, while you were probably sitting on a beach somewhere." At that point, my dad finally stepped into the hallway, crossing his arms. "Watch your tone," he warned. I took a sharp breath and let it out slowly. "You know what? No, I'm not going to watch my tone. I've been bending over backward to help you two, and you lied to me." My mom sighed dramatically, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "We just wanted to have a nice trip, Brian. Why do you always make everything about money?" That was it. That was the final straw. "I hope you enjoyed it," I said coldly, "because I'm done." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and right there in front of them, I canceled the automatic transfers. My mom's face dropped, and my dad's jaw clenched. For the first time, they actually looked worried. "Brian, don't do this," my mom pleaded. "You know things are hard for us." I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Yeah, apparently not hard enough to stop you from going on vacation." I turned to leave, but just as I reached the door, my dad's voice stopped me in my tracks. "You're just jealous we didn't invite you," he said bluntly. I turned around slowly, completely stunned. "Excuse me," he just shrugged nonchalantly. "That's what this is really about, isn't it? You're just throwing a fit because we didn't invite you." My hands were trembling. Not from sadness, not from intense, burning anger. That's the distinction between me and Denise, I thought to myself. "She wouldn't have given you a single dollar," I stated firmly. "And yet you continue to act like she's flawless. I spent an entire year making sure you were taken care of, and you can't even respect me enough to be truthful." I didn't stick around for a response. I just turned on my heel, walked out, got into my car, and drove off. When I finally arrived home, my phone was blowing up. Calls from my mom, my dad, and even Denise. I didn't bother answering any of them. As I stepped inside, Sandy was seated on the couch waiting for me. One glance at my face and she knew something was up. I dropped down next to her, took a long, shaky breath, and finally spoke the words I had been holding back. "I'm done giving them money." At first, Sandy remained silent. She simply nodded, as if she had been expecting me to finally admit it. Truthfully, I think I had been waiting for this moment too, waiting to finally reach the point where I couldn't take it anymore. For months, I had felt burdened by this unspoken duty, as if it was entirely my responsibility to support them. Because if I didn't, who else would? But that was the thing. I already knew the answer. Denise could have handled it. She and her husband had plenty of money to take countless vacations, yet somehow it fell on me, the one carefully managing every paycheck, to ensure our parents' comfort. And for what? Just to be treated as a backup plan while Denise was praised and admired? Not anymore. Sandy leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms thoughtfully. "So, what now? You think they're just going to accept it?" I rubbed my hands over my face, feeling drained. "They'll probably try to blame me. Maybe send Denise to try and talk me into changing my mind. But I don't care. I'm done. And I meant it. Or at least I thought I did." The following morning, my phone was vibrating nonstop. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages, coming in one after another. I ignored every single one. Then around midday, a loud, persistent knock sounded at the door. Sandy glanced at me with a worried expression. "You didn't invite them, did you?" I shook my head and made my way to the door. But before I could reach it, I heard Denise's voice on the other side. "Brian, I know you're in there. Open up." I swung the door open, and there she was, Denise, dressed impeccably in designer clothes, sunglasses resting on her head, like she'd just strolled out of a fancy brunch. Standing right behind her were our parents, looking just as well put together. I moved forward just enough to block the entrance, making sure they couldn't just barge in. "What do you want?" Denise scoffed, rolling her eyes as if I were being unreasonable. "Are you seriously punishing Mom and Dad just because they went on a vacation?" I couldn't help but let out a bitter, humorless laugh. No, I'm cutting them off because they've been lying to me for months, treating me like a walking ATM while putting you on a pedestal. But you knew that already, didn't you? She rolled her eyes again. Oh, come on. You're acting like they made you give them money. I clenched my jaw tightly. No, they didn't force me, Denise, but they sure knew how to manipulate me. The fake sob stories, the guilt trips, we don't know how we're going to make it calls, all while they were setting aside money for vacations with you. My mom finally spoke up, looking hurt and defensive. That's not fair, Brian. We really were having a hard time. I raised an eyebrow skeptically. Having a hard time, huh? So hard that you needed extra cash for medicine? While sipping drinks on the beach? That statement shut her down immediately. Denise gave an exaggerated sigh. Look, it's not a big deal. Just reactivate the payments and let's forget about this. I almost burst out laughing in disbelief. You really think I'm just going to give in and keep paying? Number, you can take care of them. For the first time during the whole encounter, my dad, who had remained silent up to that point, stepped forward. His expression hardened as he said, "We don't want your money." I crossed my arms, giving a short nod. Good, because you're not getting it. Denise let out a mocking chuckle. Oh, wow, so now you're just going to desert them? Sandy, who had been quietly listening from the sofa, rose to her feet and stepped closer. Desert them? You mean the way they betrayed him, deceived him, and exploited him? Denise twisted towards Sandy as if she had only just realized her presence. Oh, fantastic. Just what I needed. Your input. That's when Sandy suddenly seized Denise's hair. It happened in an instant, so fast that none of us could react. One moment, Denise was standing there looking pleased with herself, and the next, Sandy had her fingers wrapped around her perfectly styled locks. Pay very close attention to what I'm about to say, Sandy stated, her voice eerily composed. You and your parents are never setting foot in this house again. Brian is finished with you, and so am I. Now turn around, get into that ridiculously expensive car of yours, and leave. Denise yelped, desperately smacking at Sandy's hand until she was finally released. Stumbling back, she looked utterly furious. You're absolutely unhinged, she shrieked. Sandy grinned. Go ahead, test me. For the first time, genuine unease flashed across Denise's face. She turned toward our parents, expecting them to step in, but they just stood motionless. I think it finally dawned on them that they had lost. Denise scoffed, straightened her attire, and shot me a final glare. You'll regret this. I simply smirked. Not a chance. And with that, she marched away, our parents shuffling behind her like helpless strays. The moment they were gone, I turned toward Sandy. She merely shrugged. She had it coming. For the first time in days, I burst into laughter. Remind me never to get on your bad side. That was the last time I ever sent my parents a single dollar. If Denise was so flawless, she could take over their care. The next morning, my phone buzzed. I already knew exactly who it was before even glancing at the screen. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. The moment I said hello, my mother's voice erupted through the speaker. Brian, I am absolutely appalled by what happened yesterday. That woman of yours had the audacity to lay hands on your sister. Who does she think she is? I leaned back in my chair. Oh, you mean when Denise barged into my home, insulted both me and Sandy, and was rightfully told to leave? My father interjected. She yanked Denise's hair. That's a physical attack. You need to keep your wife in check. I scoffed. And you need to rein in your daughter. Sandy merely responded to the attitude Denise came in with. Brian, we taught you better than this. I rolled my eyes. Right. And you also trained me to function as your personal ATM. So pardon me if I'm no longer accepting life lessons. You're being extremely disrespectful, my mother whined. We are your parents. I exhaled sharply, already exasperated. And I am an adult who never invited you to my house in the first place. You showed up unannounced, got put in your place, and now you're upset about it. You need to get that woman under control, Brian, my father snapped. That was the last straw. I let out an amused laugh. No, what I actually need to do is hang up. Michael, don't you dare. Click. I tossed my phone onto the table and ran a hand over my face. Sandy strolled in from the kitchen sipping a coffee. That bad, huh? I looked up at her and smirked. Apparently I'm supposed to control you, she snorted. You can't even control your own sister. Good luck with that. I assumed that was the conclusion of everything. But 3 hours later, there was another series of knocks. Loud, forceful, and relentless. Even before I reached the door, I knew exactly who was on the other side. Denise stood there, arms crossed tightly, her expression a storm of rage. But she wasn't alone. Her husband, Edwin, loomed behind her, and unlike her, he didn't just appear furious, he looked downright threatening. I barely had a chance to say, "What the hell do you want?" before he shoved past me and barged straight into my home. You think this is amusing? he snarled, jabbing a finger aggressively in Sandy's direction. Letting your little girlfriend put her hands on my wife? Sandy rose to her feet, completely unfazed. Your wife ran her mouth inside our home. Edwin took a step closer to her. Maybe she needs to be taught some manners. Before I even registered what I was doing, my fist was already in motion. I struck him square in the jaw, sending him staggering backward in disbelief. But I wasn't stopping there. Every ounce of resentment, every moment of pent-up frustration that had built up over the last year erupted all at once. Blow after blow, I let it all out. I didn't hold back. By the time I stepped away, Edwin was sprawled on the floor, groaning in pain, his face a mess of swelling and bruises. Denise shrieked and dropped beside him. Have you lost your mind? I shook out my aching hand, fixing her with an icy stare. You came here looking for a fight. Well, you found one. Edwin coughed, wiped blood from his mouth, and peered up at me. You didn't have to go that far, man. I crouched down, my voice dangerously low. You threatened my girlfriend in my house. If you ever step foot in here again, you'll regret it even more. Denise pulled Edwin to his feet, her glare sharp enough to cut glass. You just declared war, Brian. I smirked. No, you did. Still dazed, Edwin mumbled. I shouldn't have. Too late, I interrupted. Leave, now. Without another word, they turned and walked out. Sandy approached, glancing at my bruised knuckles before shifting her gaze to the now-closed door. Taking a sip of her coffee, she muttered, Well, that escalated quickly. I exhaled a short laugh, shaking my head. No kidding. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No lingering guilt. No obligations weighing me down. No more being the overlooked sibling, constantly trying to prove my worth with money. I was done. After Denise and Edwin's departure, I never heard from them again. No texts, no phone calls, just absolute silence. And honestly, that was perfectly fine by me. Sandy and I carried on as if nothing had transpired. Then 3 days later, my neighbor, Mr. Ryan, stopped me while I was heading to my car. Boy, you really kicked up some chaos, he remarked, shaking his head. I frowned. What are you talking about? A grin spread across his face. Your folks and your sister had themselves a bit of a, let's say, disagreement. And by a bit, I mean the entire neighborhood probably heard it. That piqued my curiosity. When? Last night, he replied. I was outside watering my garden when it started. Your sister pulled up, slammed her car door so hard I thought the glass would shatter, and started yelling before she even reached the front steps. I raised an eyebrow. And what exactly were they fighting over? Mr. Ryan leaned in slightly, as if about to share the juiciest gossip of the year. Didn't mean to eavesdrop, but they were shouting so loud I couldn't not hear it. So naturally, I wandered over and stood beneath their window. I chuckled. Of course you did. Your sister was fuming, he went on. Kept shouting that they should have treated you better, that if they hadn't been so damn selfish, you wouldn't have cut them off. She kept yelling that it was their fault you walked away, and now she had to deal with them. I blinked. Deal with them? Mr. Ryan smirked. Oh, yeah. And here's the best part. Your parents told her that since you weren't handing over money anymore, it was her turn to step up. I burst into laughter. Oh, and it gets even better, he added, eyes gleaming with amusement. She lost it. Started screaming that she wasn't their personal bank, that they should have saved their money instead of spending it on fancy vacation. Called them parasites. And my personal favorite, she actually shouted, why don't you just call Brian and apologize so he'll start sending money again? I wiped away a tear from my cheek. And how did she respond? Your father said, we don't need anything from him anymore. And my mother? Oh, she broke down, he replied. Kept going on about how you had betrayed her, how family should always be there to support each other. But your sister didn't fall for it. She looked them straight in the face and word for word said, you don't care about family. You care about who you can squeeze money from. Then she stormed out. I shook my head in astonishment. So in just 7 days, they ended up losing both of us? Looks that way, Mr. Ryan replied with a casual shrug. And now they're completely alone. No favorite child, no steady cash flow. Just the two of them sitting in that house with no one left to guilt trip into taking care of them. I exhaled deeply, allowing the reality of it all to settle in. For years, they had played favorite, treated me as disposable, and used me like a walking ATM. And in the end, a single moment of clarity was all it took to bring it all crashing down. And the best part? I didn't feel a shred of remorse. I glanced at Mr. Ryan and smirked. Well, I guess they finally got what they always wanted. Oh yeah, and what's that? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I reached for my car door and grinned. They always wanted Denise to be their perfect child. Well, now they're stuck with her. With that, I drove off, feeling absolutely no regrets. Update. I honestly believe that was the conclusion of everything. I really did. My parents were left to deal with their own mess. Denise was fuming, and I had finally broken free. Life was calm, uncomplicated. Then roughly a week later, a message appeared on my phone from an unknown number. "Brian, it's your father. Call me back. It's urgent." I stared at it for a moment, debating whether to ignore it. Curiosity got the better of me. I dialed the number, and he answered instantly. "Brian, listen, I don't want to argue, but we need to talk. If this is about money, it has nothing to do with money," he interrupted. "It's about Denise." That got my attention. "What about her?" There was a brief pause before he finally said, "She's getting divorced." I nearly dropped my phone. "Wait, what?" "Edwin kicked her out," my father explained. "Said he was done financially supporting her. Now she's back here with us. She has nowhere else to go." I swallowed back a laugh. "So let me get this straight. The same sister who told you to convince me to start sending money again is now broke and living under your roof?" My father let out a long, exhausted sigh. "Brian, please, this isn't something to joke about." I leaned back against the couch. "It's kind of hilarious." Silence stretched between us. Then finally he spoke again. "She wants to speak with you." I smirked. "Not my concern." And with that, I ended the call. I suppose Denise had finally experienced what it felt like to be on the other side.
Asterisk. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. Asterisk.